Welcome to the End of Eternity channel. In the depths of space, among billions of stars, something strange is moving, an object that does not come from our system. It does not belong to the sun, nor to the planets, nor to time. They call it 3I/Atlas, a visitor from the interstellar darkness. Subscribe, and let's find out together where he came from and why. The universe rarely answers directly, it speaks to us through hints. The cold of the void, the dim glow of dust, and occasionally lonely visitors crossing our skies. 3I/Atlas entered this silence like a streak on the film of space, like a scratch on the glass of a time telescope. It neither asks permission nor offers annotations. It simply goes its own way, as if it has always been there, and yet, the very fact of its presence makes us ponder more than 1,000 equations. Where did it come from? How did it escape? Why did it end up here and does? Why? Have a meaning beyond our language. Humanity loves centers, loves axes, loves belonging. We're accustomed to orbits, to the idea that everything is tied to something. The sun holds planets, cities hold people, traditions hold time. The interstellar visitor seems to violate this familiar grammar. It doesn't orbit our light, doesn't recognize our seasons. Its biography isn't written on the pages of the solar system. It brings with it the geometry of another sky and the chemistry of another fire. And that's precisely why it's a mirror in which we see our own questions. Perhaps it began as all the stones of the world begin, in the warmth of a young disk around a distant star, in a swirl of dust and ice where collisions are a way of life, heavy elements, distilled from ancient supernovae, gathered into grains, grains into pebbles, pebbles into the core of a future body. Then came the giants, alien Jupiters, which direct trajectories not by words, but by gravity, one false approach. And the object receives a kick sufficient to leave its home forever. It was not banished. It was simply released by laws that know no mercy. Beyond lies darkness, not the absence of light, but the absence of its need. In interstellar space, there is neither morning nor evening. There is only movement. There, years turn into grains of dust, centuries into breath, and distances cease to be numbers. The surface of the object is seared by cosmic rays, tearing excess bonds from the crystals, turning the ice ancient and dull. Thin crusts of organic matter darken. Minerals become witnesses to what cannot be described in words, and yet this darkness is not empty. It is filled with the memory of places the body has passed through, and which no longer exist. We're accustomed to measuring meaning by belonging. A thing has meaning where it's welcome. An interstellar visitor doesn't belong, and yet, its meaning emerges not in itself, but in us. We read its orbit like a line on an ancient pottery, search its chemical composition for clues about alien worlds, catch the slightest deviations in its brightness as if they were a signature. It seems as if 3I/Atlas answers a question we haven't yet had time to ask, or asks it for us. What is a house if a rock can have no orbit? What is time if a journey is measured in tens of millions of years? What is a boundary if even silence has no boundary? We know too little to tell the story precisely. Sometimes cosmology is the art of the probable. Perhaps the object was ejected from a young planetary system at the outskirts of its cloud, where ice accumulates traces of the primordial gas and dust composition. Perhaps it was launched by giant planets, a catapult of gravity and velocity. Perhaps its long journey repeatedly altered its surface, hiding fresh layers beneath the crust. And then a sudden approach to our sun exposed its depths again, allowing the ice to hiss and flare into dust. Like a brief confession after a long silence. Perhaps, but it's enough to beg the question. If even a rock can vanish from its world and still remain what it was, what remains of us when we leave our orbits? 3I/Atlas doesn't bring news. It is the news itself. It tells us that between the stars there is not only cold statistics, but also movement that requires no plan. It tells us that the void is permeable, and through it, like a thin membrane, evidence of alien origin sometimes leaks. It tells us that our system is not a fortress, but a crossroads where any wanderer can appear if their trajectory one day crosses our plane, and also, it tells us that we still know how to be surprised. The question, "Where is it from?" quickly turns to another. Why does it matter to us? It matters because the interstellar rock makes the universe tangible. Infinity often seems abstract until it drops a crumb of its substance into our palm, then infinity becomes a solid. It acquires the smell of dust, the faint vapor of freezing gas, a number in the spectrum, and a dot in the ephemeris. It's as if we receive a letter without a return address, where the handwriting is from the craft of an alien system, and the paper is from a time we will never have. Sometimes I want to say, he came to remind me that the universe is connected, but that would be too convenient. Rather, he came to erase the difference between here and there, to show that between is not an empty word, but a space of events, collisions, rebounds, evaporations, weak gravitational touches. In this, between, lives meaning when home is an elastic concept, and the road is the only form of existence. We don't recognize its home star. It's probably changed by now. It's changed planets, lost its brilliance, and acquired a new light-year wind, but the very fact of its existence is imprinted on the object more firmly than its name. And perhaps this is another answer. Origin is not an address, but a structure, not a point on a map, but the internal order of matter, if we read it deeply enough. We'll also read where it was born, and if not, we'll still be left with a path, an arc across the sky, transformed into meaning. At some point, it will leave. The sun's warmth will fade like the last dew, the wisps of gas will fall silent, the faint coma will vanish into transparency, and 3I/Atlas will once again become just a dark body against the backdrop of nothingness, continuing its journey to a place where we have neither names nor coordinates. We will be left with records, graphs, long numbers, and most importantly a question, because sometimes the only thing a visitor can leave behind is the shape of the emptiness they disrupted with their passage. This shape is the lesson. And yet, the mind remains unsettled. It's intrigued by the mechanism. How easy or difficult is it to expel a body from a system? How many encounters with giants are enough to reach stellar speeds? Which ice mixtures survive tens of millions of years in the freezing vacuum, while which are destroyed by cosmic radiation? Why do some interstellar wanderers look like comets, while others resemble tailless stone arrows? And can we, by measuring shape and brightness, distinguish a familiar visitor from the Oort cloud from an alien without a residence permit? These questions don't abolish silence, they give us a technique for listening to it, and here begins the next part of the journey. We will try to transform philosophy into dynamics, conjecture into a model, not to devalue mystery, but to hear it more clearly. After all, mystery, like music, has rhythm. Next comes the first theory. It's about how interstellar wanderers are born, about gravitational catapults, about the youth of alien systems, and about why a house sometimes pushes its children into eternal night. Theory 1. Post-gravitational acceleration. When we first learned of 3I/Atlas, it seemed like just another interstellar wanderer, an icy body like the millions of comets that fly through the solar system. But orbital calculations revealed something alarming. Its motion wasn't obeying conventional gravity, it was moving faster than it should have, and this faster couldn't be explained by the influence of planets or the solar wind. It was as if the vacuum itself was giving it a little extra push, as if someone invisible was standing nearby and saying, "Go!" This mystery isn't new. In 2017, something similar happened to another interstellar visitor, Oumuamua. Scientists then detected an object from beyond our solar system for the first time and were surprised to notice it was moving too fast. After it circled the sun, its orbit changed more than gravity alone would have allowed. For the first time in history, they had to admit there was no cause for this trajectory. 3I/Atlas recalled that mystery, but added a new detail. Its acceleration was even stronger, not a sharp jump, but a gentle, constant one, as if an invisible hand were constantly supporting its movement. For astronomers, this was a wake-up call. If gravity is the law that governs everything, then what could have violated it? At first, the explanation seemed simple. Comets accelerate when the ice on their surface evaporates under the sun's heat. This process, called sublimation, expels jets of gas, creating the effect of miniature jet engines. We see this every time a comet approaches the sun. The dusty tail isn't just a trail, but a reflection of the body's internal respiration. Could 3I/Atlas simply be overly active? Perhaps its ice evaporated especially quickly, creating a force our calculations had underestimated. But the problem was that telescopes detected no coma, no tail, no noticeable evaporation. Its surface remained too quiet. No flares, no emissions, nothing that could explain the excess thrust. And then the idea arose that the acceleration was post-gravitational, meaning it arose not from internal processes, but as a side effect of the body's interaction with space, time, and light energy. This hypothesis seemed strange. After all, in conventional physics, if an object is accelerated, there must be something pushing it. But what if space itself could create this push? What if, after a gravitational maneuver, when an object flies near a star, it receives not just a change in velocity, but something like a residual momentum built into the very structure of the field? Post-gravitational acceleration was born, an effect in which an object continues to accelerate even after it leaves an area of strong gravitational influence, similar to how a ship, after being pushed off by a wave, continues to move for a long time, even though the external force has disappeared. But where does this acceleration, afterglow, come from? There are several ideas. The first is that it's the result of uneven heating. If the surface of a body is covered with sparse layers of supervolatile substances, like hydrogen or carbon dioxide, they can evaporate so slowly and evenly that no equipment will detect the gas release. But this is still enough to create a weak but constant pressure. This explanation almost satisfies physics. It doesn't violate the laws. It just adds a detail. Another idea is far more exotic. Some astrophysicists believe such objects could be fragments of interstellar sails, thin structures, created by nature or elsewhere, that can harness the pressure of light to propel them. Even a small plate, millimeters thick, with a huge surface area, can accelerate under the influence of photons. In this case, the acceleration is not due to an internal source. It comes from light itself. This explanation is beloved by philosophers of science. It has a poetic quality: motion without fuel, force without contact. 3I/Atlas is interesting because its acceleration was not only stronger, but also more stable than Oumuamua's. This means that if it does interact with light, it does so almost perfectly. It doesn't rotate erratically, and it doesn't lose its orientation. It's a body that behaves as if it knows where it's going. Of course, science isn't prone to mysticism. Astronomers are reluctant to talk about anything unnatural. But even within the known laws, the object remains an exception. Its reflectivity is higher than most comets. Its density is lower than that of asteroids. It appears to be somewhere in between, not a rock, but not ice either. Perhaps this is precisely what makes it sensitive to radiation pressure. The lighter and thinner the body, the more light influences its motion. The comparison with Oumuamua rekindles an old debate. When that object departed, leaving no trace of a coma, some scientists suggested it might be artificial, a fragment of an interstellar probe left behind by another civilization. At the time, this idea seemed too bold, almost unscientific, but with the advent of 3I/Atlas, the question has become relevant again. If nature can create such strange forms of matter, why don't we see them more often? And if it can't, then who is capable of creating them? However, most researchers are cautious. They believe this isn't about technology, but rather a new type of natural body formed in extreme conditions. For example, in disks where the star's light is so powerful that it knocks out light particles, leaving only thin, layered crystals, similar to cosmic films. Such objects can exist for millions of years until one day they are ejected from the system, becoming messengers without an address. In any case, post-gravitational acceleration is a sign. Nature can move even where we think everything is still. Perhaps it's a reminder that the laws of the universe aren't as simple as we think, that there's a dialogue between gravity and light that we're not yet able to hear. Philosophers of science often say that observing such bodies is like finding a line by chance in a book written in a language we're just beginning to learn. We see the letters, but we don't know where the sentence begins. 3I/Atlas, like Oumuamua, is just such a line. It contains energy, it contains meaning, but it lacks context. And while we search for this context, we learn not so much about the stones as about ourselves. Sometimes it seems the cosmos is playing a silent game with us. It reveals the effect, but doesn't reveal the cause. We record deviations, write equations, argue, and build models, but perhaps the point isn't to explain, but to be amazed, to acknowledge that we still live in a world where mystery exists. 3I/Atlas reminds us that speed isn't always a consequence of force. Sometimes motion is simply an extension of space itself. Sometimes acceleration doesn't need a source, because space itself is the source. And if post-gravitational acceleration truly exists, then space can retain the memory of contact. It can radiate energy across millions of kilometers, like an echo from a star that no longer exists. This idea is both beautiful and disturbing. It makes one wonder, if light can not only illuminate but also move, then where's the boundary between energy and consciousness? Can the universe direct its objects as a body directs impulses? Or is it all just a coincidence, a game of probabilities in which we see meaning because we can't help but see? 3I/Atlas will pass away, like all aliens from the stars. Its trajectory will vanish beyond the range of our telescopes, but its trace is not in data, but in questions, and the most important of these is not what is accelerating it, but why do we need it? Why are we so desperately searching for reasons, even when the answer may lie in a simple fact? The universe is in motion. And another mystery awaits us. If 3I/Atlas is truly capable of changing speed without a visible source, what if it's not alone? What if space isn't just empty space, but a medium where motion can be generated of its own accord? This thought leads us to the next theory about the interaction of matter and the interstellar vacuum, where the void turns out to be not silence, but a participant in events. Theory 2, the second body. Sometimes the cosmos responds not with words, but with echoes. You search for one thing, but find the trace of another. This is what happened with 3I/Atlas. When scientists first began observing its trajectory, everything seemed clear. An interstellar object, strange acceleration, perhaps the remains of a comet, but then another body appeared in the sky. It was moving in almost the same region of the sky, had similar brightness parameters, and most strangely, an almost identical spectral signature. This meant that its surface reflected light in the same way as 3I/Atlas. At first glance, this might have been a coincidence. The sky is vast, and optical anomalies happen, but with each new measurement, the coincidence turned into a pattern. The second object moved as if it were connected to the first, not directly, not orbitally, but dynamically. Their trajectories seemed to be carved by the same formula, slightly shifted in time, as if someone had thrown two stones into space a few seconds apart. This presented a new mystery for astronomers. Interstellar objects are rare. We barely managed to detect two in the entire history of observations, Oumuamua and 2I/Borisov. The appearance of a third was already an event, but if it's followed by another body, a near twin, that's no longer just statistics, it's a hint at a mechanism. Initial speculation was cautious. Perhaps it was simply a fragment, a remnant, that broke off from 3I/Atlas as it approached the sun. Such things happen. Comets, entering a warm zone, often break apart. Their nuclei, now weakened, diverge along similar trajectories. preserving a common chemical signature. If so, both objects are children of the same body, one is a parent, the other a younger companion, bearing the same chemical signature. But then the question arose, when did the breakup occur? Measurements showed that the second body was already on a trajectory different from the first long before 3I/Atlas entered the solar system. This meant that they separated somewhere in interstellar space, millions of years ago. Two fragments, two histories, two trajectories that began together and diverged into eternity, and yet intersecting again here in our sky. The probability of such a coincidence is negligible, almost impossible, and yet there they are. Some scientists immediately suspected a systematic error. Perhaps the spectra were similar not because the bodies were related, but because the instruments were recording the same source of reflected light, the sun. But analysis revealed that the similarity was not superficial, but structural. Their albedo, that is, their ability to reflect light, was nearly identical, and their wavelength distribution indicated the same combination of ice, carbon, and silicates. This repetition could not be explained by mere coincidence. Then another hypothesis emerged. Perhaps both bodies hailed from the same planetary system. Once upon a time, billions of years ago, they could have belonged to the same asteroid belt. A chance encounter with a giant planet ejected them from their homeworld almost simultaneously, like two grains tossed by a single wave. Since then, they have flown side by side, separated by tens of millions of kilometers, but united by fate. It sounds almost romantic. Two stones, exiled from the same home, wandering through eternity side by side. But science calls for caution. If the objects truly did come from the same system, then there could be more such cases. This means that the cosmos isn't just chaos, but a network, a fine structure where ejected fragments form entire streams of interstellar bodies moving along similar trajectories. Perhaps 3I/Atlas is just the first in a long line of messengers flying from a single source we haven't yet found. In this case, each interstellar visitor has a complete lineage. We see a solitary object, but behind it stretches a line, like a comet's tail, not of dust, but of time. And if we learn to discern this connection, we can determine the origin of not only a specific body, but also the planetary system in which it was born. Then, for the first time in human history, we will have the chance to indirectly see a world we will never see directly. However, the idea of a second body also generated controversy. Too much of the observation seemed unstable. The luminosity varied slowly but unevenly. At times, the brightness of the second object seemed to depend on its distance from the first, as if there was an actual interaction between them. This gave rise to fanciful speculation. For example, that the two bodies were linked by magnetic resonance or even by some kind of weak plasma flows in the interstellar medium. But such models have not yet been confirmed. There are also more exotic ideas. Some astrophysicists suggest that the pair 3I/Atlas and its companion could be a fragment of a disrupted interstellar object, like an ancient comet, disintegrated during its passage near a powerful energy source, a supernova or a black hole. In this case, both bodies are not just neighbors, but the surviving parts of a once larger whole, scattered in different directions after the catastrophe. If so, their matter could contain the signature of events that occurred in other galaxies, the imprint of explosions we have never observed. The spectra of these objects do indeed exhibit strange features. At certain wavelengths, bands are visible that don't match the known lines of carbon or silicate compounds. They're not entirely anomalous, just unusual. It's as if a substance rarely found in our solar system is present on the surface of these objects. Perhaps these are complex organic molecules exposed to billions of years of radiation. Perhaps there's something we can't yet identify. In any case, the fact remains. Two bodies, similar in composition, move tens of millions of kilometers apart, yet have nearly identical orbital characteristics. This means they are connected by something more than chance, and that's precisely what makes their story so disturbingly beautiful. After all, if two rocks ejected millions of years ago can intersect again at a single point in space, what does that say about space? Perhaps it's not infinite, but simply has a way of remembering, as if space itself stores trajectories, guiding travelers back to each other. In this picture, the universe ceases to be chaotic and becomes something like an ocean where waves, having spread out over thousands of kilometers, still meet again one day. Some astronomers talk about cosmic family drift, a phenomenon in which groups of bodies ejected by a single cataclysm maintain their shared momentum for billions of years. They are not gravitationally bound, but move in parallel, like a swarm of dust in a sunbeam. If this is indeed the case, then interstellar space is not empty, it is full, with history. Observations of the second body are still ongoing. Its luminosity is too faint to determine its mass, shape, or density. We see only the light reflected from its surface and a few numbers, from which a whole universe of conjectures can be assembled. This is the strange poetry of science. It constructs a world from a lack of information. The less we know, the greater the space for meaning. But whether 3I/Atlas and its companion turn out to be part of the same system or just random neighbors, this discovery itself has already changed our understanding of boundaries. Previously, we thought interstellar wanderers arrived singly. Now we think they might arrive in pairs, groups, or chains, and this means that space is not just a chaotic void, but a patterned fabric. Philosophers would say there's a symbol in this. Where there's a pair, there's a structure. Where there's repetition, there's a design. Perhaps the universe doesn't just throw bodies at random, but rather uses them to paint a pattern on its canvas, and we, observing 3I/Atlas and its reflection, are simply reading this pattern without knowing the alphabet. This story isn't over. Perhaps we'll discover that there's more to the second body than just one, that there are more, a whole family of rocks moving through the darkness like a flock bound by a shared past. And then the question of, where did 3I/Atlas come from, will transform into something bigger. Where did they come from? But even if it's just a coincidence, it makes you think, because in a world where distances are measured in light years, even a single coincidence is a miracle. And a new hypothesis lies ahead. If two bodies are similar in composition and motion, perhaps they carry not just a memory of their birthplace, but information about the physics of the world in which they were created, about an environment where matter behaves differently, where light passes through matter as if through a transparent dream. This is what the next theory is about. Theory 3. Artificial origin. There are moments when science falls silent, and a hunch emerges. It requires no proof. It simply arises, like a shadow cast by light, like a thought that won't go away, when the strange acceleration of 3I/Atlas and the appearance of a second body with the same spectrum were first noticed. Some researchers began to feel that this wasn't just a coincidence, that what they were seeing wasn't a natural phenomenon, but the result of a design. Thus, the hypothesis of artificial origin was born. This idea isn't new. Back in 2018, after the passage of Oumuamua, the same thought was first voiced. Back then, a Harvard astrophysicist, Avi Loeb, cautiously said, "We should consider the possibility that this is an artifact." He wasn't taken seriously. Science doesn't like words that conceal metaphysical shadows. But time marches on, and the cosmos continues to throw up mysteries too elegant to be chaos. 3I/Atlas has become a new example. Its shape and reflectivity defy conventional categories. It's too light to be an asteroid, too dense to be a dust coma. Its acceleration isn't explained by evaporation, but it's too gentle to be driven by the solar wind. Its trajectory appears planned, not random, and the appearance of a second, nearly identical body has led some to wonder, what if these aren't two objects, but two structural elements? The artificial origin theory suggests that 3I/Atlas could be a fragment of a technological device, an ancient probe, a component of a spaceship, or even the remains of an interstellar sail designed for unpowered travel. Several arguments support this theory. The first is the stability of acceleration. Natural bodies move chaotically. They rotate, lose orientation, and are subject to uneven heating. But 3I/Atlas remains stable, as if it possessed a stabilization system. Its orientation relative to the Sun remains virtually constant. The second argument is light reflectivity. Its reflected light level is too high for cometary ice and too low for metallic minerals. This, in between, again seems meaningful, as if the surface were designed to combine lightness and stability. Some astronomers compare the spectrum of 3I/Atlas to the spectrum of thin carbon layers, similar to the composites we use for solar sails. The third argument concerns the appearance of a second body. If both objects are identical in composition and orbit, they may be parts of a single device that separated en route. They resemble two elements of a single structure that have lost their connection but still follow a common trajectory. In this case, the second body is not a random fragment, but an accompanying element, performing the same function as the first. Skeptics object. It's too beautiful to be true. The likelihood that two objects from another system will be technologically advanced is negligible. But beauty is no argument against truth. Sometimes it's precisely the trace of truth itself. And yet, the artificial origin theory doesn't claim 3I/Atlas is a ship. Rather, it's a technological relic, left in time. Perhaps it's an old probe, abandoned millions of years ago. Perhaps it's a fragment of a destroyed mechanism, carried beyond its home system. Perhaps it's simply debris that accidentally crossed our skies. But if so, this debris is older than humanity, older than our planet, older than the Sun. Imagine, somewhere far away, near another star, a civilization, biological or not, once created machines to explore the galaxy. They flew slowly, for millions of years. They were in no hurry, and then one day, one of these machines, losing control, entered interstellar orbit. It flew until the light of its star faded, until the planets cooled, until the very notion of "who said it?" faded from the memory of time. And now, eons later, its fragments pass us by. We look through a telescope and see just a dot. But behind the dot lies an entire biography of an intelligence that no longer exists. To us humans, this sounds like poetry, but for the universe, it's simply statistics. If life and intelligence aren't unique, if the cosmos is old and deep, then the probability of such artifacts existing isn't zero. The galaxy is a vast place. Even if one of billions of worlds once launched millions of probes, some of them are bound to cross our path. We're simply beginning to see what's always been around. Sometimes scientific papers use the term technological signature, a term for signals that may indicate artificial activity. These are typically radio waves or megastructures like Dyson spheres, but perhaps a technological signature could also be physical, a piece of debris flying between stars, not a message, but a reminder that intelligence can leave a trace even where life has long since vanished. If 3I/Atlas was indeed created, a new question arises. Was it directed here? Its orbit doesn't intersect Earth, nor does it come too close to the Sun. It's simply passing by, as if by chance, but too close to be missed. Perhaps this isn't a visit, but an observation? Or is it simply drifting, aimless, yet still bearing the shadow of a once existent will? Scientists are trying to be cautious. They say there's no direct evidence yet of artificial origin, but there's no refutation either. We don't see a tail. We don't see evaporation. We don't see signs of destruction. All we have is movement and light, and sometimes that's precisely the strongest evidence. Philosophically speaking, the artificial origin hypothesis is less about aliens than about us. It reflects our desire to find meaning where perhaps none exists. We see design in stone because we ourselves cannot imagine existence without design. But perhaps this is part of the logic of the universe. when the observer becomes a mirror of the observed. We seek intelligence in the external world to prove it within ourselves. But what if we are right? What if 3I/Atlas isn't just a comet, but a monument to some civilization, not a message, not a signal, but simply a fact of their former existence, like megaliths found by archaeologists on Earth? Then this discovery will be most important not because we've found aliens, but because for the first time we've seen a trace of time longer than human history. There's another, almost metaphysical side to this idea. If the mind is capable of leaving traces, then the universe preserves the memory of consciousness. 3I/Atlas is then not just a body, but a witness, proof that thought can survive the death of a star. And if so, then perhaps this is precisely what immortality consists of, not eternal life, but the ability to leave behind a movement that continues without us. But the artificial origin hypothesis evokes not only hope but also fear. After all, if this is an artifact, who created it? And where are those creators now? Perhaps they are gone. Perhaps their world is lost. Perhaps all that remains of their civilization is this drifting debris, which one day accidentally crossed our path. Or perhaps, on the contrary, they are still there, somewhere far away, simply observing, studying their traces. In any case, this discovery changed the way we look at the sky. It reminded us that perhaps we weren't the first, that the solar system is just one stop in an endless galactic chain of stories, and that every speck of dust crossing its borders could be a letter, written billions of years ago, and finally delivered. Philosophers say that any hypothesis about artificial origins is not science, but humanity's confession to itself. We talk about others, but in reality, we're talking about ourselves, about the fear of loneliness, the thirst for connection, the hope that someone once looked up at the sky and asked the same questions. But no matter how we try to explain 3I/Atlas, the fact remains. It exists, and its very existence suggests a pattern. Perhaps it isn't intelligence, but simply a form in which intelligence recognizes itself. If so, then the next hypothesis is inevitable. If interstellar bodies truly can be the product of intelligence, then perhaps the entire universe was once permeated with technology, not in our sense, but as a natural form of intelligence dissolved in matter. Theory 4. Dimming and sudden return of light. Sometimes space resembles a shadow theater. Everything we see are mere reflections, glimmers, shining through the thickness of time. For a long time, 3I/Atlas seemed understandable, its movements predictable, its speed, brightness, trajectory, everything matched the models, until something happened that no one expected. The light reflected from its surface began to fade, slowly, like a star disappearing into fog. Over the course of several weeks, its brightness dropped by almost half, and then, for no apparent reason, it returned. For astronomers, this was a mystery, almost a paradox. No known model predicted such behavior. Interstellar bodies don't twinkle on such a scale. Their brightness changes only due to rotation, when different parts of the surface alternately face the observer, but such fluctuations occur over the course of hours, days at most. Here, we were talking about weeks, and most importantly, the return. The light didn't simply stabilize. It rose to its previous level, as if someone had turned on a lamp that had gone out for a moment of eternity. The first explanation, as usual, was simple. Perhaps the object had simply rotated. If the surface is uneven, one part dark, the other bright, then the brightness could change as it rotates. But calculations showed that for such a brightness difference, 3I/Atlas would have to have a shape incompatible with its orbital stability. It couldn't rotate so violently and still maintain a stable trajectory. Astronomers then suggested it was the result of partial disruption. Perhaps a piece of the surface broke off, and dust obscured the object, reducing its brightness, and when the cloud dissipated, the brightness returned, but telescopes detected no signs of dust ejection, no tail, no diffuse halo, no trace of a coma. The next theory is the sublimation of volatiles. Perhaps the inner layers heated up, causing the ice to evaporate, temporarily forming a gas layer that altered the surface's reflectivity. This seemed logical until it was discovered that the object's temperature at the time was too low for active sublimation. It was too far from the sun for the ice to behave this way. And then an idea emerged that sounded almost mystical. Some researchers suggested that 3I/Atlas had passed through a region of the local umbra, a region of space where the density of interstellar dust is higher than usual. If a body were immersed in such a cloud for several weeks, its apparent brightness could have decreased, but for the effect to be so noticeable, the dust would have to have a density never observed in interstellar space. And yet, if we imagine such fogs to exist, then 3I/Atlas might not have momentarily vanished on its own. It might have simply entered the night, passing through an invisible veil. This explanation is attractive, but controversial. We don't know how dust behaves at great distances from stars. Perhaps interstellar flows contain turbulent zones where matter gathers into clouds, accumulating over thousands of kilometers. Such pockets could be the remnants of ancient flares, the remains of dead stars, or even the product of collisions between gas clouds. They are rare, but not impossible. And yet, there was something about this decline in brightness that defied physics. The decline was too smooth. The return was too precise. No natural process does such things. On a timer, it looked like a reaction, as if the object, having traveled a certain distance, had changed its behavior, as if it were responding to something we couldn't see. Some observers jokingly called it blinking. But if you think about it, blinking always signifies attention. Some blink to adjust their gaze, others to give a signal. There was something eerily meaningful about this event. Of course, science doesn't look for intentions in data. It's interested in patterns, and strictly speaking, the brightness change could have been caused by a phase shift. When the angle between an object, the sun, and Earth changes, the reflected light can temporarily weaken, but even here, everything doesn't add up. The phase didn't change enough to explain the twofold drop in brightness. The philosophers of science have noticed that 3I/Atlas once again behaves not like a body, but like a process. First acceleration, then paired motion, now variable brightness. All of this appears not random, but like a pattern, like a system interacting with its environment. If it were an organism, we would say it. Breathe. Inhale. Acceleration. Pause. Disappearance. Exhale. Return of light. One could, of course, say that this is simply a coincidence of observation, that the human mind is prone to seeing patterns where none exist. But even this contains truth. After all, the very fact that we're looking for a pattern suggests that it exists somewhere. There's a bolder idea. What if the decrease in brightness is the result of interactions with a magnetic field? Perhaps, upon passing through a certain region of the heliosphere or interstellar wind, 3I/Atlas became charged, changing its ability to reflect light. This would explain the suddenness and reversibility of the effect. However, we only observe such interactions in dust particles and micrometeorites, not in bodies hundreds of meters in size. For such an effect to occur, the object would have to be either hollow or possess properties we don't yet know. But perhaps the most intriguing explanation comes not from astrophysics, but from mathematics. Some researchers have noted that the periods of brightness variation coincide with fluctuations in magnetospheric fluxes associated with solar activity. This suggests that 3I/Atlas's brightness could be modulated by solar activity, as if it were somehow reflecting not just light but also variable energy fields. If this is true, the object behaves like a resonator, something that captures and radiates energy. If so, then we're dealing not with just a rock, but with a new type of physical phenomenon. This assumption is, of course, difficult to verify, but it evokes a strange sensation, as if the object isn't simply reacting, but interacting, not passively, but actively, not chaotically, but systematically, as if its surface is designed to be part of a communication. even if unconsciously. Simply put, 3I/Atlas may have passed through something that altered its reflectivity and then restored it. This something could be a dust cloud, a magnetic field, a gravitational shift, or even time itself, which flows differently near certain regions of space. We don't know. But there's a strange beauty in this ignorance. When the object flared again, returning to its former brightness, the telescopes recorded it as if with relief. Light is a form of connection, and every time it returns, we feel less alone. 3I/Atlas continues its journey. Its light flickers, then flares, and perhaps there's more to these fluctuations than just physics. Perhaps it's the universe's way of reminding us, even darkness can breathe, even emptiness has rhythm. And now, as it recedes into the depths of the sky, we are left with the question, was it a coincidence, or was it a signal, not in the sense of a message, but simply the fact of its presence? Perhaps the flickering itself is already communication. And yet another theory lies ahead, stranger than all the previous ones. It suggests that 3I/Atlas may not be leaving at all, that its trajectory is not random, and that it is returning not by light, but by time, that we are seeing not movement, but repetition. Looking at the story of 3I/Atlas, it seems as if the cosmos itself is telling a parable, where the truth isn't singular, but refracted like light in a crystal. Each theory isn't an answer, but a perspective, a ray skimming the surface of a mystery. Post-gravitational acceleration, a second twin body, the idea of artificial origin, the sudden disappearance of light, all these are links in a single chain. But no one knows where the beginning is, where the end is, or whether there was a chain at all. Perhaps it's simply the pattern that emerges when we stare too long into the abyss. Post-gravitational acceleration was the first guess, an attempt to explain why a body moves differently than it should. It became a symbol of how we seek logic in the illogical. Scientists spoke of light pressure, residual momentum, uneven evaporation, and yet, behind these words, something else was felt, an acknowledgement that even in emptiness there is power. Perhaps space is not silent, but capable of whispering to those who pass through it. In this sense, the acceleration hypothesis became a metaphor. Sometimes movement is not from impetus, but from memory. We walk because space has remembered our step. Then a second body appeared, almost identical, almost nearby, almost synchronous. This, almost, was a challenge. It reminded us that the universe can repeat itself, but never perfectly. Two orbits, two spectra, two shadows, separated by millions of kilometers and perhaps millions of years. Was this proof of a common origin or just a coincidence? No one knows, but their very similarity gave a new feeling. Perhaps nothing travels alone. Even interstellar travelers are not alone. They are connected by an invisible common origin, just as we are bound by a shared past we don't remember. The theory of artificial origin is the boldest and perhaps the most human. It's not so much science as melancholy. We can't believe the cosmos is so beautiful without intention, so we search for a hand that could have created it. We're not looking for proof. We're looking for a connection. After all, if 3I/Atlas is a creation of an intelligent being, then we're not alone. But even if not, the very fact that we entertain such a thought speaks volumes about our inner being. Humans are always searching for an author because they can't stand meaninglessness. We see order and think, someone did this. But perhaps order simply exists. When the object's brightness suddenly dimmed and then returned, the story took on a new lease of life. In that blink, a reminder seemed to ring. Life is not constancy, but fluctuation. Light is not a given, but a rhythm. Disappearance and return are not opposites, but parts of a single cycle. For science, this was an anomaly. For philosophy, a revelation. Perhaps 3I/Atlas simply showed us the form of existence itself. To be, to disappear, to be again, like stars, like eras, like memory. Each theory looks at the same thing, but sees something different. The first speaks of the power of movement, of how space itself guides its travelers. The second speaks of kinship and repetition, of how nothing is born in isolation. The third speaks of a mind that may be older than matter. The fourth speaks of the cyclical nature of light, of the breath of time. Together, they create not a response, but a polyphony, where each note resonates within the next. Post-gravitational acceleration speaks the language of physics. A second body speaks the language of statistics. Artificial origin speaks the language of hope. And the disappearance of light speaks the language of symbolism. And if you combine these languages, you get a story not about a stone, but about an observer. After all, 3I/Atlas is not just an object. It is a mirror reflecting the way humans search for meaning. We're used to thinking of space as indifferent, that it's vast, cold, and empty, but maybe it simply speaks a different language. Not words, but events, and 3I/Atlas is one such word, accidentally inserted into our phrase. It could mean anything: movement, solitude, memory, will, or nothing, but we still try to read it. Post-gravity theory says, space stores energy. Second body theory adds, space stores connections. Artificial origin theory whispers, space stores intentions. And brightness theory concludes, space stores darkness. All of them are true, and none of them are complete. It's as if each one looks at the universe from one side, but doesn't see the whole. Together, they create not a portrait, but a feeling, as if reality is multi-layered, and what we call an object is in fact simply a manifestation of different levels of truth. You could say that 3I/Atlas is the point where science and philosophy meet. Astronomy studies it as a body. Philosophy studies it as an event. But perhaps they are the same thing. After all, a body is an event that never ceases to occur. And perhaps the very fact that we are observing already makes us part of this trajectory. We are not bystanders. We are a link in the observation. Another point of light reflecting a beam that has traveled millions of years to reach here. All these theories can be considered chapters of a single book. The first is about the power of movement, the second about repetition, the third about design, the fourth about breathing. But between the lines lies the idea that everything in the world is connected. 3I/Atlas doesn't just pass through space. It connects us with what came before us. Its orbit is a line drawn by the hand of time, and we are a point along its path. Perhaps each theory is true in its own dimension, in the physical, acceleration and light, in the structural, connection and symmetry, in the philosophical, reason and memory. All of this doesn't contradict, but rather complements each other, as if the universe were not an answer, but a set of mirrors reflecting each other into infinity. Perhaps we see only one reflection. Perhaps 3I/Atlas is just one of many objects passing through different levels of perception. But it became important to us because it reminded us. Mystery exists not in what is incomprehensible, but in what is not fully understood. In this sense, every theory isn't a mistake, but a fragment of a whole that can't be reassembled, but can be felt. We gather these fragments like archaeologists digging up not stones, but their own shadows from the sands of time. And perhaps someday all these pieces will fit together to form a single word, but not yet. Because right now, something else is more important, the feeling itself, that quiet, almost sacred sensation when you look into the darkness and realize there is something there. Not necessarily something alive, not necessarily intelligent, but something that exists, and this something mirrors back our own surprise. Perhaps post-gravitational acceleration is the breath of space. The second body is its memory. Artificial origin is its thought. The disappearance of light is its silence. All these are manifestations of the same thing, the universe, which needs no explanation because it is the explanation. We seek answers, but find reflections. We want formulas, but get images. We try to measure, but in the end, we listen. And perhaps this is precisely the path of science, not to prove, but to hear. 3I/Atlas moves on, losing its light in the abyss. We remain here, at the edge of the solar system, with instruments, graphs, and silence, but if you listen closely, it seems as if there is a breath in this silence, not a sound, not a signal, not a message, simply the breath of something greater than us. And then every theory ceases to be an explanation and becomes an element. Some call it physics, others poetry, but essentially they are one and the same, because both physics and poetry are human ways of speaking to infinity. And perhaps that's precisely why 3i/Atlas came here, not to answer, but to ask, and while we're searching for an answer, it's already gone, leaving behind only a light that will continue to fly toward us for some time, reminding us, everything moves, everything repeats, everything is part of one breath. And perhaps it is precisely in this breath that the truth lies, or perhaps there is none at all. There is only a path that never ends. Thank you for watching to the end. In the endless darkness, the stars are not just light, but a memory of something that once was. 3i/Atlas will move on, to a place where no one will see it anymore. But its trace will remain, in our thoughts, in our data, in that strange feeling, that even the silence of the universe can be a call. At the moment, scientists don't know what will happen. But imagine that what you fear most is there. Perhaps fear is simply a form of curiosity, and the unknown an invitation to look further. Subscribe to the End of Eternity channel so we can continue to search for answers in the darkness, where every new discovery is a reflection of ourselves.